Shivangi, I think Abhishek is saying start.
Okay, sure. So the introduction of our speaker, Ayesha has worked at impactful non-profits in India to bring education and skills to underserved communities. She is passionate about advancing economic opportunities for the poor with a focus on children, women, and minority groups through social, political, and financial protection. Her work with marginalized communities and underdeserved children, solidified her commitment to contribute to education equity and poverty alleviation efforts targeted at vulnerable populations in developing countries. She is currently getting her master's in public policy at the University of Singapore. Welcome on board, ma'am. So
Hi.
I'll begin with the first question. While working as a Teach for India fellow, what were your key learnings, and can you share some initiatives you undertook as a fellow to have a better improvement in the system?
Sure. Hi, Shivangi. Hi, Abhishek.
Hello.
And hi, everybody else. Thanks for having me. So I can share a bit about my big learning experiences at Teach for India. I think I did 2 years of the fellowship, and then I worked for 3 years as a program manager at Teach for India. And I think two big takeaways that I had from working in the dev space itself was just how do you be solution oriented in the face of adversity and challenges, because everywhere you look, it's very easy to identify problems within the system that you're working in. And also it's easy because the problems are so apparent, right? They are so big. So I think it's very easy to focus on the problems, but I think what's important is how do you stay solution oriented? How do you build that mindset? And I think another big learning was just how do you deal with ambiguity, and how do you make decisions in the face of when you don't have enough information. You'll never have all the information or data that you need to make informed decisions, but how do you still make the most right decision with all the information that you might have with you? I think those were like big key lessons that I learned at Teach for India. And I think I also see Nupur here. Nupur was also a Teach for India fellow. And she's also an MPA from National University of Singapore, same place where I'm studying. So if she wants to add anything, that would be great.
Oh, not really. I think you are better at articulation, Ayesha. Nice to see you after so long.
You too.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, and that's why I joined.
Thanks.
So yeah, very excited.
Okay, so I'll go ahead with my second question. Like, as we know that there are a lot of myths that exist in our country in education system. So while working, what all myths did you get rid of, and what do you think, like what all myths that are there that still exist in our education system that are like still there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myths was just how I entered the school ecosystem thinking that, there's this bias that government school teachers don't want to work or they don't put in effort. I think that's one of the biggest myths I was able to break. I was just able to see that if government school teachers are not working, what are the different reasons behind that? There are just so many reasons, right? The class size on average is more than 60 students in a class. All those students are at different learning levels. Someone is able, so for example, in grade 6, there'll be 10 students who can read grade 6 level text, but there'll be another 15 students who don't even know the alphabet very properly. So what is really expected out of the teacher? How do they cater to diversity in class like this? And also they have minimum support. It's not like they have extra help teachers who can cater to different learning levels in the classroom. So I think that was one big myth that got broken, that it's not like government school teachers are not hardworking. I think I've seen some of the most committed government school teachers within the school that I was working in. I think the entire the different problems just make it very hard for government school teachers to cope, and there's limited support, and it's really nobody's fault. So I think that's one big myth that got broken, and I think it still exists, right? I was only able to break this myth because I experienced the school ecosystem in Delhi. I think, though, I do think this is still a widely held myth.
That was quite like enlightening, as in because we can see that still in India in government schools, it's like the ones government schools that are near the cities or something like that, they are still doing better off, but the ones that are in remote states and in the districts, they are still like there's no system, as in there's no proper system of education yet.
Yeah.
So that was, yeah. So I'll go ahead with another question. Like as you said, you first worked as a fellow of the Teach for India, and then you were managing the team. So like, what was the difference you could see as a fellow, and then as you when you were managing the team?
Right. I think as a fellow, you are directly teaching kids in a classroom. So you see impact on a daily basis. You teach something, you see kids doing well on an exam or a test or an activity based on what you've taught. And you can see, okay, this is what went good with my teaching. This is what I still need to fix because students haven't learned this. So I think you can see impact very closely. And I think that's a great feeling, right? But I think as a manager, my impact was very layered because my work with students was through fellows. So I wasn't directly working with students. So yeah, I think the layered impact, it taught me a lot about how do you work with teams, how do you manage for results by managing people. Also, how do you really help your fellows or your team define what success means for them. And I think that also means you need to let go of your own idea of what success looks like in a classroom. So I think that was the biggest mindset shift. What I thought success might look like in a classroom is not something that my team member might feel. They might have a different vision of what success is. And how do you then align with organization values, mission, and come to a consensus?
So like as you are pursuing masters in public policy, so like what do you think you could have missed upon if you haven't gone for this course, like as in terms of about the program and exposure that you are getting like when you are doing this course?
I think my big reason for doing a master's was just I wanted a experience of personal growth. I think I have never lived abroad, or I've never been in a school institution or curriculum that has been extremely rigorous. I think studying in India opens avenues only to a certain extent. And I think the master's program here in Singapore really challenged me to learn different things, adjust in a different environment. And I think it also gave me, to some extent, it also helped me build a mindset towards more research and evidence. So for example, if you're doing a lot of things on the ground, I had 5 years of on ground experience in India, but I didn't have the theoretical or academic knowledge behind some of those things. I think that those are concepts which policy school have really helped me learn and understand. So yeah, I think this is one big thing I will take back with myself whenever I join work again.
So like as you just told how rigorous the system is there, like and different from India. So could you elaborate more on like how education system is executed in India and in Singapore? Like how are they different in their approaches towards the programs and all?
I think I might not be able to make a fair comparison because in Singapore, I've only experienced university level education, and that too post grad, not even a bachelor's. So I might not be in a position to make a fair comparison because in India, I've experienced bachelor's and school life. Over here, I'm doing a master's. But I think one key shift which I've noticed in Singapore is everything is online. Children are, I think, tech is a big thing. Children learn using technology, iPads and laptops. This is the norm. There is no culture of writing assignments and submitting written work. And I think that's a great plus, I feel, because to some extent, it's also preparing you for your professional life where everything happens online. So I think that's one big shift. And another shift I've seen is nothing that is tested here is based on memory or learning. Everything is application based. Everything is evaluation or creating different things based on what you've learned. But I think in India, where I did my bachelor's at University of Delhi and where I did even my schooling, I think everything was limited to, like, all my tests and assignments were limited to rote learning things and memorizing and writing. What does this mean? What does that mean? I think in Singapore, there's a big shift from the what to the why of learning. That's how I would summarize it, probably.
Yeah. So, like, what would like? I'm just going specific about public policy. So, like, what's your take on the importance of public policy, and like, what can we say? These are the good characters. Like, if these are the things, then the public policy is going to be impactful and good. So, what's your say about
That's such a big question. I don't know how to answer that, but I think your public policy, whenever any policy is being made, I think one big thing to remember is how practical your policy is. Because no matter how good the design or framework is, if it's not implementable on the ground, then there is no point of having a great design. And I think another thing is how the policy is going to impact different stakeholders. I think that also needs to be very clear for any policy to be effective or convert into its long-term outcomes. Yeah.
And like, how, like, could you brief upon like how can we measure that this public policy is impactful, like on the ground level, as in its impact?
How do you monitor and evaluate public
Yeah.
policy? I think the
Yeah.
easiest way is talk to your consumers, talk to the people who are for whom the policy has been implemented. I think that's what I've learned in my experience here. But I would actually love to hear from Abhishek over here. What do you think? How do you monitor and evaluate policy and understand whether it's successful? Is Abhishek here?
Oh, sir has said like he's traveling.
Okay, all right, okay.
We could take Nupur's insight on that.
Okay. Nupur, do you have anything to add? Or anybody else for that matter over here?
No, I think you summarized like really good points, talking about the beneficiaries, like all the stakeholders who are important for the policy. And also, like, while making policy, we make sure, right, like to have the assessment criterion inbuilt. So that makes measuring impact easier. But you are the policy expert, Ayesha. I am not. So
Also, I think it's important to see. I mean, policies are not made for 5 years. Policies are made for 20 years, 30 years. So I think it's very important to have evaluation criteria at very like intervals of time. So it can't be like, okay, you made a policy and now you're going to see results. Obviously, your results and outcomes are going to be very long term, but what are you doing to see short term successes? So are there monitoring and evaluation structures after every year or 2 years? Are your staff are your performance appraisals for staff based on how they're doing their work, whether things are converting into the ground as they were planned or not? I think that's important. Like short-term evaluations are important.
Can I say something?
Of course.
It's not a point, but a question rather. Like in a country like India, where the diversity is at a larger scale, if you see, whether it's class or maybe caste. So how do you take that into account while like policies are being made? So how do you take diversity into that concept?
I think a lot of diversity, if you want to really consider diversity, I think that needs to go into your policy design. Like when you are actually laying down the foundations of your policy, have you taken into account how this is going to affect different demographics in terms of gender, where people are living, urban rural divide? It could be anything, but I think it needs to come into the design stage. It cannot be after the design stage, because if we've missed people in the design stage, that means the benefits are not going to really reach them. I don't think if I answered your question, Vasudha, but I would also love to know what you think.
I actually don't know how to summarize this, because diversity in India is actually like, it's so widespread if you see. So I don't know how to like even take that into account, like while making a policy. But I think you said it right. Like while designing a policy, it is important to take everything in notion, or everything to be taken into account, so as to make that policy reach to people for whom it is being made.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
and I think when you are like designing policy, you also, everything is intentional, right? If you're including some people, that's intentional. If you're not including people, that is also intentional. So I think just being aware about who are the stakeholders you will reach and who are the people you will not reach, I think that awareness is important.
Thank you.
Okay, like just to add on what you people were discussing, I think like both of you were right. And as in like, though we are implementing, like, could we decentralize the plan of implementing? Could it be that? Could it be possible in terms of public policy? Like implementing from the village or something, like from the lower level, so that, because at times the people who are making the policies, they are setting up and like they are okay, we are implementing. But what about the people whom it is supposed to reach? At times it's like, okay, it's just in the upper layer of the population, okay, it has reached till them only. Could it be that? I don't know.
Could you rephrase your question again? I didn't get the question.
I'm not talking about the question.
Okay.
I'm adding to what you people were discussing. As in, I'm talking about the implementation. Like we could start from the grassroots level, because at times it's from the center. Okay, the state has implemented, but it has not reached to the people it is supposed to reach.
Yeah, I agree. I think policy is of two types. It can either be bottom up or top down. And I think that's a very deliberate decision policymakers make. So I agree with you.
Okay. Oh, so like I have to say, those of you who have got any questions, like you can put it in chat box, but do keep in mind that it has to be related to public policy and not Indian politics. And yeah, like if you have got any questions, just write it. Adrija, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much for this amazing session. I just wanted to ask this, that like while you all are talking about how important it is that when we are designing a particular policy, we keep in mind the diversity of it. Like diversity is a huge issue when it comes to implementation of public policy per se. But I also wanted to say that that we have learned, like I come from a social science background, so we are always taught this, that like public policy with the proper implementation, research on the policy and who it is impacting becomes very crucial. So I just wanted to know, what do you think is the best kind of, not like the be all end all, but what constitutes a good research that would formulate a more like a more impactful policy at the ground level per se?
What constitutes good research, right?
Yes. I hope I was able to.
Yeah, I think you were clear. Okay, so just a caveat, I have very limited experience in research myself. My only research experience is the 2 years I've been here at NUS. So I think one, what's the existing literature available based on the research that you're doing? What's the existing evidence that you already have? And I think second, good research definitely involves talking to your stakeholders. I think there needs to be a balance of both quantitative and qualitative research, and especially in the field of social sciences and policy. Qualitative research becomes very important. Focus group discussions, interviews, surveys with your stakeholders. I think that helps you take your research to a more deeper level rather than having just a surface level understanding. That's my understanding of what good research constitutes.
No, absolutely. I agree with it. Thank you so much.
Radha, you raised your hand. Do you have got any questions? Okay. So like this is the last question from my side. What would you advise those of us interested in pursuing a career in public policy? Like what all suggestions do you have got for us? As in terms of fields, or how should we work upon it?
Advice for pursuing public policy.
Yeah.
I think I don't think if I'm the right person to ask for advice, but I think my opinion, every time someone asks me this question, get on ground experience, get real implementation experience before you decide to study public policy. Because I think a lot of conversations that happen at graduate school are just about your own experiences, how you've tackled with problems, what are the challenges that you've seen. And I think that discussion with your peers and classmates becomes very rich and enhanced if you yourself have a deep understanding about the work that you've done. I think without having experienced the ground reality, it might be hard to relate or even like learn at a deeper level from your professors or even from your classmates for that matter. I think the classmate and the class community which you have at graduate school is the one that you benefit the most from. I think those are the people who really challenge you and help you learn. So yes, I think definitely get that experience, get into whatever you want, whatever aspect of policy you like, experience it for yourself, reflect on it, and then decide to study public policy.
Okay, so as I'm done with my questions that I had to ask, like I would say, could you share some of your memories or some of like events that took place that are like close to your heart during your Teach for India fellowship and all?
Memories. I think lots of memories. I think one
like that some of them that are very close are like
sure. I think the most poignant memory is when I remember when I started Teach for India in 2015. We were told by our manager to do these baseline assessments for our students, and all of these assessments were at different levels, right? They ranged from level 1 to level 5, and level 1, and each of these levels meant that you can read that grade level of text. So a grade level 1 will mean that you can read grade 1 text, and grade 5 will mean you can read grade 5 text. So I did all the assessments for all of my students, and one of these students had a grade level of 1 and he was in grade 6. So he came up to me crying and he was like, this is not possible. I cannot be at a grade level 1. It's just impossible. Because I think kids, for the first time, it was really easy for them to understand that if they've passed a grade 2 assessment and they can't go further, this means that they are at the learning level of a grade 2 child. And I think that was just very appalling and surprising for them. I think it was a shock for them because they weren't able to understand the depth of the learning crisis they were in. So one of these students came to me and he couldn't clear beyond level 1 of the assessment. And he was like, this cannot be my level. He was like, retest me. I did his, and he asked me to do his reassessment some 3 times because he was just of the opinion that this cannot be my level. And I did it 4 times for him. And it was still not going beyond level 1. And then I just really had to sit down with him and tell him that, this is what the reality is right now. But it's okay. I'm going to be here for 2 years. And we will really work through it. And by the end of grade 7, when I left Teach for India after 2 years, he was at grade level. He could read grade level 6 text. And today he's studying in a private school. Like at the end of my fellowship, we got him admission in a private school because his parents were so invested. He himself was so driven to learn. So I think that's a very poignant memory. Every time I think of my classroom, that one student really, like, that memory comes to my face of him saying, that Didi, this cannot be my level.
Thank you. Okay, so just like I'm just asking your opinion, like about the education policy that we have got in like 2020. So like how do you think it's like, is it impactful, or the changes that this education policy has brought in? Is it good, or is it okay, or is it just the same old ones like that?
I think it's
Just your opinion.
Yeah, of course. To be honest, I really love the new education policy. I think it's so ambitious. But okay, no, I'll start with the things that I really love about it first. I think I really love the fact that it gives a very strong focus on foundational learning and early arithmetic, reading and writing, foundational reading and writing. I think for so long that focus has been absent in all of our national education policies, and to a huge part the learning crisis in our government schools can be attributed to the fact that kids are not learning basic concepts, and the learning deficit just keeps increasing. So I think I'm a big advocate of the fact that the government has put it in the policy that foundational learning is extremely important. That just increases the stakes for everyone the moment it's put in the policy. I also like the fact that higher education is being given a lot of importance. Like I saw that institutions need to be recognized, and children will have the option over years to drop out after 2 years of college or 3 years of college or 4 years of college. And a lot of importance is also being given to developing PhD programs and research programs within India, because currently I think less than 3% of our colleges offer PhD or research education, and less than 50,000 children are doing PhD in India. Everyone goes abroad. So I think there's a lot of focus on building research and academic orientation in our higher education institutes. Those are two aspects I think I really appreciate. And I think now that it's in policy, it's definitely a long time before we will see things happening. But it means that the government has started thinking about it. I think what will make the national policy, the new one, a success is how well the state and the center will work together on rolling out this policy within their own districts. And I also think a lot of the success of the policy will depend on the state government's capacity to be able to roll out this policy. So, for example, if there is a lot of focus on experiential learning within the new education policy, it talks about moving away from rote learning and memorizing. But I think unless the state governments are not supported with how do you help teachers who worked with that mindset for over 20 years, how are you helping those teachers to build a new mindset, or supporting them with the shift towards experiential learning? If that's missing, then probably the policy is just good on paper and implementation will not be great. So yes, I think the center really will need to support state governments on implementing it.
It's just related to the education again. Like, do you think in case of India, as we like our population is very big, so condition specific mainstream schooling would work, or we are like okay with this national curriculum, or policies could be like related to education could be formed at like in a manner of federal government, like okay, it's related to the state, so state could have more say in that, or conditions.
I think it's still the same, right? Like although the central government prescribes things to happen, education is on the concurrent list, so state governments do have discretion on choosing what to do, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Education is a state subject.
Yeah. So I think states do have discretion, Shivangi.
Okay, Aisha, I just, because all the people who are mostly working here are beginners and who are curious about, public policy, and who are also very passionate about improving the status of education in India. So what we are all basically doing, is trying to find out the issues that we right now have, and do some research on those issues and try to come up with policy solutions. But again, like, we are absolute beginners. So my first question is what would you suggest? Like, how do we begin? Like, do you have any tools for beginner research, like policy research? Because I know that not all of us are going to have that, research aptitude immediately. But yes, like something that exposes them to good research. So do you have any resources for that?
I think the biggest resources really leverage the United Nations online network. I think there are so many existent toolkits that UNICEF, UNESCO, and all the different organizations within the United Nations, they've created ready-made toolkits and research papers. So I think if you want to get a deeper understanding of any issue that is close to your heart, just log on to the net and look at World Economic Forum, look at United Nations, and try to look at their toolkits. They have ready-made toolkits that you guys can use and understand and see how are they being applied in different countries.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was that, obviously people are also curious about what happens after we do a course in public policy. So what available careers do you know of, and what are you planning to do after this? Like, are you going to continue with education? I know it's a complex question, but yeah, I just want to know.
I think public policy is a very broad degree. So I think it gives you the opportunity to work within research if you want to. It gives you the opportunity to work within program implementation and social impact if you want to. And of course, you can work directly in public policy roles with your governments in your respective countries. What I am currently looking at, Nupur, is starting out roles in social impact consulting, but at smaller scale. I'm not looking at the big companies which require a lot of prior work experience and are sort of very corporate in nature. So I'm looking to begin change fields a little, look at layered impact through social impact consulting, and then see where it goes.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Ayesha?
Yes, ma'am, I have a question.
Okay. Sure, Narottam, go ahead.
So, what's the scope of public policy in like private sector? Other than government sector, what's the scope in private sector?
I think a lot of organizations in India have a government and public service unit, or a government and advisory unit. Back of my mind, I know KPMG and EY definitely have one, and they work. So basically, the government outsources their projects to these firms, and these firms help the government. They come up with the entire scope and sequence and framework. So yeah, I think that's my limited understanding of how private sector and public policy works.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I think apart from that, also to answer your question, there are also tech firms like Google, Twitter, LinkedIn. All of these are also increasingly having public policy units because of the high level of cybersecurity laws and stuff like that. So I think they also have a lot of opportunities in public policy now, all the tech giants.
Also, how is like legal advisor is better to consult regarding these situations? So how is a public policy expert is better than legal advisor in these situations?
I think the legal and the public policy team always works together. I don't think one or the other is better.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think what he meant was how their roles can be different. Like, in what terms?
I think my understanding is, after speaking to a few people, that the legal consulting team will be very closely related to will be closely working with the laws that exist within the country, whereas the public policy teams might be working very closely with stakeholders, and that could be anyone. It could be private firms, it could be the government stakeholders who implement the laws in the country. I think the role in that way is a little different.
Okay, thank you, Ayesha. Anybody else?
Good evening, ma'am. It was really great hearing you. I just wanted to know your opinion on a policy. In Scandinavian countries like Finland, there is no homework policy for kids. Like they do not give homework to them, and because they feel that there should be more social development and the kids should spend more time with their family and all. But in India, we have a very extreme policy. Like there is the policy of giving homeworks in summer vacations and all, and sometimes children are burdened up with it. So how do you see this difference? Like what should be the take in India?
Yeah, I first I just think we cannot compare Scandinavian countries and India. It's just a wrong foundation to compare these countries just because of the huge difference in context that they have. Secondly, I think giving homework is obviously not a part of policy, right? It's a norm that exists in India. That's what I feel. But I also think we have to acknowledge the fact that in Scandinavian countries, the level of human development index is just really high. Children are going back to households where parents are really invested in their learning. Parents themselves are very educated and they can afford the best things for their children to be able to learn, right? Even playing is learning for children, and parents can afford that. But I think in India, our kids are not always going back home to households where parents are educated themselves, or even if parents are educated, they might not have the bandwidth to engage with their children because a lot of them are daily wage earners, laborers. So I think the context in this way really differs. I do agree with the point that there needs to be some limit to the amount of homework that that our children are given at school, because if it's ruining our children's mental health, if it's creating a lot of pressure, then that is definitely a challenge we need to address. Does that help, Geeta?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. It's true that HDI in Scandinavian countries, it's far higher than our country.
Also, ma'am, I have another question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, like, how, which option is better, public policy, public administration, or PSIR, international relations, that is?
I do not think I can comment on that. I don't think either or is better. I think you need to know why you want to study something, what is in it for you, and what you can contribute to that field. But I think each field in its own way has its own merits and limitations. Nupur, what do you think about MPA? You did public administration.
Yeah, I think for me, that was something that I wanted to do. I did not want to deep dive into policy research. So that was it. Like, I wanted to just gain some basic understanding of how things work at policy level. So that was my goal, Narottam. And that's the reason why I pursued MPA as compared with MPP, like the public policy instead of like public administration. So it depends on what the end goal, like Ayesha said, what is your goal and what do you want to achieve at the end of it?
Yeah.
So,
to make it a little easier for you, Narottam, I think what a big difference I've seen between the MPP and the MPA program, just the program. I'm not talking about the field itself, just the postgraduate degree. I think public policy really gives you a nuanced understanding of research, and both quantitative research and qualitative research. And probably in an MPA degree, the research focus will always be there, but it might not be as deep as they teach you in a MPP program. So I think that's one key difference. If you really want to understand research methodology, then MPP gives you a better opportunity to experience that.
Can we say that public policy is more about formulating and researching, and public administration is like more into like implementing things and looking like after implementation, and that's it?
I don't think so. I think all layers are covered everywhere.
yeah, exactly. There's quite a lot of overlap
Yeah.
in the courses. But yeah, like you said, public administration does have more of like public management and, how do you manage it at the government level. So
Yeah. And that's why also you might see that an MPA program versus an MPP program, there's also a significant difference in the cohort that comes in. A lot of MPA students are mostly existing civil servants who worked with the government for a few years. And that's why they come in with a lot of design and implementation background already. Whereas MPP, that might not always be true.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Yeah, Shivani, can hear you.
No, I was like saying to Abhishek sir if he has got anything to say. Like just to wrap up, just could you summarize something for us to have as a key learning? Like just to wrap up the session.
I think if public policy really interests you, start reading up more about it. Do your own research and talk to more people who've done public policy degrees or who are currently working in the public policy space. I think that really will expand your own horizon and scope of understanding of why you might want to study public policy.
Thank you. Nupur?
No, thank you so much, Ayesha. It was an enjoyable session. And I am sure from your journey, a lot of people got a lot of takeaways. Like for me, what you said about do some work on the ground and then go pursue public policy was the highlight of it, because that's what I also firmly believe in. And the previous speaker we had on this series also, shed light on that fact. So thanks a lot. And can you like give us your handle, or like where do you prefer to be?
Yeah, I think I'll share my LinkedIn profile in the chat box. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
And also, like, could you just repeat for the interns is what resources they have to refer for research?
Yeah, should I just put it in chats? I was looking
Yeah.
at United Nations website. So you can basically look at different organizations within the UN, UNICEF, UNESCO, International Labour Organization, and you can just type toolkits and you'll just find a lot of things.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is going to help us a lot because all of us, like all of the interns are beginners in the field. So thanks a lot.
No worries. I had a great time talking to you all.
Same here, Ayesha, same. If nobody has anything to add, we are going to close out the session. It must be quite late for you, right? Like about
10. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See you then, Ayesha. Thank you so much.
Cool. See you.
Ma'am.
Good evening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.